The voice cut through the cabin like a blade. "Ma'am, you need to stand up. Right now." For a split second, the first-class cabin of Westbridge Air Flight 742 froze. Champagne glasses hovered mid-air. A seatbelt light chimed softly, absurdly calm against the tension. Several heads turned at once. Evelyn Brooks did not move. She sat in seat 1A, hands folded loosely in her lap, eyes forward. The overhead lights caught the faint silver at her temples. Her coat was plain, dark wool, no logo, no jewelry except a simple watch with a leather strap, worn thin at the buckle. The kind of watch you keep because it works, not because it impresses. Thomas Reynolds stood in the aisle beside her, posture rigid, shoulders squared like a man bracing himself for resistance. He was in his early 50s, hair carefully combed back, uniform pressed sharp enough to cut paper. The gold stripes on his sleeve gleamed under the cabin lights. He had spent nearly 3 decades in this space. He knew how power felt here. "Ma'am," he said again, louder now, "you're in the wrong cabin." A murmur rippled through the rows behind him. A woman in pearl earrings leaned toward her husband. Somewhere farther back, someone scoffed quietly. Evelyn inhaled through her nose, slow, controlled. The kind of breath taken by someone who had learned, long ago, that reacting too quickly only fed the wrong narrative. "I'm in my assigned seat," she said, voice low, steady, not defensive, not raised. Thomas glanced at the seat number above her shoulder as if seeing it for the first time. 1A. He already knew. He had checked twice before speaking, but knowing and accepting were 2 different things. "First class is limited seating," he replied. "Sometimes mistakes happen at the gate. I'll need you to gather your things and return to the terminal so we can sort this out." His words were polished, professional, but his eyes had already passed judgment. They flicked to her shoes, practical. To the canvas carry-on at her feet, scuffed at the corners. To her face, calm but unreadable. Evelyn turned her head slightly, finally looking up at him. Her gaze was direct, not challenging, observant, as if she were studying a problem rather than a person. "I boarded with Group 1, she said. My boarding pass scanned green. The gate agent addressed me by name. Thomas smiled, thin and practiced, the kind of smile meant to end conversations. "That doesn't necessarily mean first class," he said. "We have priority boarding for other categories as well." Behind him, a man in a tailored navy blazer cleared his throat loudly. "We're already delayed," he muttered, not bothering to lower his voice. "This is ridiculous." Another passenger chimed in. "If she doesn't belong here, why are we all waiting?" Evelyn felt the weight of the cabin settle around her. Not loud, not violent, just heavy, expectant. She had felt this before, in conference rooms, in private clubs, in hospital corridors, where doctors assumed she was there for someone else. Thomas sensed the shift and leaned into it. "Mom," he said, lowering his voice, as if offering her dignity, "let's not make this uncomfortable." Evelyn's jaw tightened, just slightly. "This is already uncomfortable," she replied. A flicker crossed Thomas's face. Irritation, surprise. He was not used to being spoken to this way by someone he had already sorted into a category in his mind. He extended his hand, palm open. Command disguised as courtesy. "I'll need to see your boarding pass." Evelyn reached into her coat pocket and withdrew her phone. She held it up, screen bright. Her name, her seat. 1A. Paid in full, no upgrades, no miles. Thomas glanced at it briefly. Too briefly. "This doesn't resolve the issue," he said. "It resolves it completely," Evelyn answered. He straightened. The decision crystallized behind his eyes. "I'm calling airport security," he said. This is a secure area, and you are refusing crew instructions. A sharp intake of breath came from somewhere behind him. The pearl earring woman murmured, "Oh my." Evelyn felt something shift inside her chest. Not fear, not anger, recognition. So this was how it would go. She nodded once, a small movement, almost imperceptible. "Do what you need to do," she said. Thomas stepped back and lifted the interphone. His voice dropped into that smooth, authoritative register that had served him well for years. "Ground, this is Lead Purser Reynolds. I have a non-compliant passenger in first class refusing to vacate a seat, requesting assistance." The word non-compliant hung in the air, sticky and loaded. As he spoke, Evelyn's eyes drifted past him to the window. The tarmac lay beyond, slick with early morning dew, ground crews moving like quiet ants beneath the wing. She could hear the low hum of auxiliary power, feel the faint vibration through the floor. Familiar sensations, comforting almost. Her mind slipped, uninvited, to another morning decades earlier. A different airport, a different uniform. A younger Evelyn standing at a counter, documents clutched too tightly in her hands, being told to wait while others were waved through. She had learned patience then, learned silence, learned that some battles were not meant to be fought in the moment. Thomas hung up and turned back to her. "They'll be here shortly," he said. "I suggest you cooperate." Evelyn met his gaze again. This time, there was something else there. Not defiance, not submission. Calculation. "May I ask you something?" she said. Thomas frowned. "This isn't the time." "When you look at me," Evelyn continued, voice even, "what exactly do you see?" The question landed harder than she intended. Thomas hesitated, just a fraction of a second too long. "I see someone in the wrong place," he said finally. Evelyn nodded, as if confirming a theory. Behind them, the cabin buzzed with low conversation. A man laughed nervously. Someone else shook their head. A flight attendant hovered near the galley, eyes darting between Evelyn and Thomas, hands clenched at her sides. She knew this was wrong. She could feel it. But she also knew where power usually landed in moments like this. Footsteps echoed from the jet bridge, heavy, purposeful. Thomas exhaled, a hint of satisfaction tightening his mouth. Security had arrived. Evelyn closed her eyes for a brief second. Not in defeat, in resolve. 14 minutes earlier, this had been just another flight, another seat, another anonymous morning in a life spent building things quietly, deliberately, far from the gaze of strangers. 14 minutes later, the trajectory of an entire airline was already beginning to bend. No one in that cabin knew it yet. Not Thomas Reynolds, not the impatient man in the blazer, not the woman clutching her pearls. But it was already in motion. The first officer was the one who broke the silence. "Captain, ground just flagged a procedural hold." Captain Harold Mason didn't look up right away. He was 64, a year from mandatory retirement, hands steady on the yoke as if the aircraft itself were an extension of his body. He had flown through storms, strikes, near misses that never made the news. A hold at the gate barely registered. "Procedural for what?" he asked, voice calm, seasoned. The first officer frowned at his tablet. "They're not saying, just stand by." In the cabin, the doors were still open. Security stepped in, 2 men in dark blue jackets with airport badges clipped to their belts. They moved with practiced neutrality, eyes scanning, posture already signaling control. Thomas Reynolds turned toward them immediately, relief flickering across his face like a private victory. "She's right here," he said, gesturing towards seat 1A. Refusing crew instructions. One of the officers, tall, late 40s, glanced at Evelyn. His gaze lingered a moment longer than professional protocol required. Not hostile, curious. "Ma'am," he said, "we're going to need you to come with us." Evelyn rose slowly, no sudden movements. She reached for her carry-on, then stopped when Thomas lifted a hand. "That stays," he said. "We'll retrieve it later." She looked at his hand, then at his face. A beat passed. "It comes with me," she said. The officer shifted his weight. "Let her take it," he murmured. Thomas's jaw tightened, but he stepped back. As Evelyn moved into the aisle, the cabin felt narrower. People leaned away without realizing they were doing it. A man whispered something sharp under his breath. A woman stared at her lap, lips pressed together. The younger flight attendant near the galley caught Evelyn's eye. Fear sat plainly on her face. Fear and something else. Shame. "I'm sorry," the attendant whispered, barely audible as Evelyn passed. Evelyn nodded once. That was all. On the jet bridge, the air was cooler. The hum of the terminal seeped back in, the ordinary chaos of rolling bags and distant announcements. One of the officers slowed his pace slightly. "You're not under arrest," he said quietly. "This is just protocol." Evelyn met his eyes. "I understand protocol." They reached the terminal. The gate agent stood frozen behind the counter, color draining from her face as she saw Evelyn escorted out. "This isn't right," the agent blurted, then stopped herself. She swallowed hard. "Her pass was valid." Thomas emerged behind them, expression tight now, sensing something slipping out of alignment. "That's not your concern," he snapped. Evelyn turned to the agent. "Thank you for saying that." Then she stepped aside from the officers and reached into her coat pocket again. Not for her phone this time. For a folded piece of paper. Old. Creased. She smoothed it out and glanced at it briefly, as if grounding herself. The officers waited. Thomas watched, arms crossed, impatience sharpening into something brittle. Evelyn unfolded her phone. She didn't dial immediately. She checked the time. 8:12 in the morning. 14 minutes since Thomas Reynolds had first told her to stand up. She selected a contact. No name, just an initial. The call connected on the second ring. "You're early," the voice said. Male, older, familiar. "They removed me from the aircraft," Evelyn said. No preamble, no emotion. A pause. Then a slow exhale. Which aircraft? She gave the flight number. Another pause. Longer this time. "That tail number is under review," the voice said carefully. "Pull the file," Evelyn replied. "Now." Thomas took a step closer. "Mom, you can't..." Evelyn raised a finger. Not at him, not aggressively. Just enough to stop the sentence from finishing. The man on the phone spoke again, his tone shifting. "They're past due." "How far?" Evelyn asked. 48 hours on the lease payment. They ask for a grace window. And the conduct clause. Silence. "Say it," Evelyn said. "It applies," he admitted. Evelyn closed her eyes for half a second. The decision settled, heavy, but inevitable. "Then initiate a compliance hold," she said. "Safety and liability grounds. That will ground the aircraft." "Yes," Evelyn said. "It will." Thomas laughed once, short, disbelieving. "This is absurd," he said to the officers. "She's bluffing." The older officer frowned. His radio crackled at his hip. He lifted it instinctively. "Unit 3, a voice said. "Stand by." Then again, sharper. "Unit 3, confirm location. We have an FAA coordination request tied to Westbridge 742. Thomas's smile vanished. "What?" he said. The officer pressed the radio closer. "Say again?" "Hold the aircraft, immediate," the voice replied.
Do not allow pushback. Across the glass, the tug vehicle halted.
A ground crew member raised his hands in confusion. The jet bridge operator froze mid-step. Inside the cockpit, Captain Mason felt it before he heard it. The engine's readiness tone died. The vibration softened, wrong in a way only pilots noticed. "Westbridge 742, the tower said, voice suddenly formal. "Abort departure. Remain at gate. Do not disconnect." Captain Mason's brow furrowed. "Tower, confirm reason." "Operational review," came the reply. "Stand by." Thomas stared through the terminal window, breath shallow now. "This isn't possible," he muttered. "This doesn't happen." Evelyn ended the call. She turned to him fully for the first time. "It happens," she said, "when people forget the difference between authority and judgment." The gate area had gone quiet. Travelers slowed, sensing disruption. Phones came out. Whispers spread like ripples. The younger officer cleared his throat. "Ma'am, who exactly did you just call?" Evelyn looked past him to the aircraft. The plane sat still now, a massive machine rendered suddenly helpless by paper and law. "Someone who answers," she said. Thomas backed away a step, then another. His face had lost its color, replaced by something raw and frightened. "No," he said. "This is a misunderstanding. We can fix this." Captain Mason emerged from the cockpit moments later, moving quickly, his authority unmistakable. He took in the scene at a glance. Security, a grounded plane, a woman standing far too calmly at the center of it all. He stopped in front of Evelyn. "Ma'am," he said, respectful without knowing why. "I'm Captain Mason. I need to understand what's happening." Evelyn met his gaze. Pilot to executive, professional to professional. "So do I," she said. Behind them, Thomas Reynolds stood very still, realizing with cold clarity that whatever line he had crossed could not be stepped back over. And in the control tower above, a red flag had been raised, one that would not come down quietly. The airline was no longer moving forward. It was being held in place. And the world, slowly, was beginning to notice. Captain Mason felt the shift ripple outward before anyone said a word. It was the way the radios went quiet. Not dead, just cautious. Voices choosing words carefully now. The way mechanics stopped waving and started waiting. The way time itself seemed to slow around a plane that, minutes ago, had been ready to cross an ocean. He turned back toward the cockpit, then stopped. The woman from 1A hadn't moved. She stood just inside the gate area, carry-on at her feet, hands loosely clasped in front of her, watching the aircraft like a chess player watching a board she already understood. No anger, no panic, just attention. Captain Mason approached her again, slower this time. "Ma'am," he said, lowering his voice. "I've been flying longer than most people in this terminal have been alive. Planes don't get held for nothing. I need to know if this is a systems error or something else." Evelyn studied his face. She recognized the lines. Weathered judgment. Responsibility carried for decades. He was not the problem. "It's not an error," she said. "And it's not about the plane." Mason exhaled through his nose. "Then it's about people." "Yes." Behind him, Thomas Reynolds hovered near the counter, fingers digging into the fabric of his vest. He had tried calling operations. No answer. He had texted his supervisor. Read receipt. No reply. A bead of sweat slid down his temple. "This is getting out of hand," Thomas said, forcing his voice steady. "Captain, she's causing a disruption. We can still resolve this quietly." Quietly. The word landed wrong. Mason turned slowly. "Resolve what, Thomas?" Thomas opened his mouth, then closed it. The words he had rehearsed on the jet bridge no longer felt solid enough to stand on. She refused instructions, he said finally. Mason looked back at Evelyn. Is that true? I refused to stand up because I was in my assigned seat, Evelyn replied. After that, everything escalated without my participation. Mason nodded once. He turned away, already making a decision. I'm going to call the chief pilot, he said. Something's off. As he walked back toward the cockpit, the radio at the gate crackled again, this time louder. Westbridge operations to gate C-27. The gate agent picked up the handset with shaking fingers. This is C-27. Do not allow passenger boarding or crew departure, the voice said. Stand by for executive review. Executive. The word hit the terminal like a dropped glass. Passengers nearby began to murmur openly now. A man with a rolling briefcase shook his head. This is unbelievable. I have a meeting in London. Another woman snapped. Someone better explain what's happening. Thomas stepped forward. Everyone please remain calm, he said, raising his hands. We're experiencing a temporary delay. Temporary. Evelyn almost smiled. Almost. Her phone vibrated in her pocket. She didn't answer it immediately. She watched Thomas speak, watched the way his voice strained as it tried to reassert authority that was no longer there. She stepped aside, answered the call. They're scrambling, the voice on the other end said. Legal is asking questions they should have asked weeks ago. Good, Evelyn replied. FAA wants documentation. They'll get it. A pause. You know this will trigger a cascade. I know. She ended the call and looked up to see the younger flight attendant standing a few feet away, pretending to straighten paperwork that didn't need straightening. Her hands were shaking. Are you okay? Evelyn asked quietly. The young woman startled. Yes. No. I'm sorry. For what? For not speaking up sooner, she said, words tumbling out now that they had started. I saw your pass. I knew. But he said... She glanced at Thomas, then looked away. He said it would be my word against his. Evelyn's expression softened, just a fraction. That's how it usually works. The young woman swallowed. It shouldn't. No, Evelyn agreed. It shouldn't. Across the gate, Captain Mason returned, face grave. Operations is stonewalling, he said quietly. They're saying this came from above their level. Above, Thomas repeated faintly. Mason looked at him then. Really looked. Thomas, he said, what exactly did you do? Thomas bristled. I followed protocol. Which one? Mason asked. The one that keeps order. Mason's eyes hardened. Order isn't a feeling, he said. It's a rule, and rules have names. Thomas opened his mouth, then shut it again. Another announcement crackled overhead, the terminal voice strained with uncertainty. Attention passengers on Westbridge Flight 742. We are experiencing an operational delay. Please remain in the gate area. Phones were out now. A man near the window was already filming the stationary aircraft. A woman whispered urgently into hers, eyes wide. Evelyn felt the weight of it spreading. The invisible moment when a private injustice became public. She checked the time again. 8:26. 14 minutes had come and gone. Something new was beginning. A man in a dark suit appeared at the far end of the concourse, walking fast, earpiece in place, badge clipped to his belt. Not airline crew. Corporate. Thomas saw him and froze. The man reached the gate, eyes scanning, landing finally on Evelyn. He stopped in front of her, breath slightly uneven. Miss Brooks, he said. Thomas flinched. Mason stiffened. Evelyn nodded. You're late. The man swallowed. Traffic from headquarters. Thomas stepped forward. Who is this? The man didn't look at him. "My name is Daniel Harper," he said, voice firm. "Regional Operations Liaison." "For what?" Thomas demanded. "For asset compliance," Harper replied. The terminal seemed to inhale as one. Evelyn turned slightly so Thomas could see her face clearly now. Not triumphant, not angry, just finished. "You told me I was in the wrong place," she said. "You were mistaken." Thomas's mouth opened. No sound came out. Harper glanced at his tablet. "Ms. Brooks," he said, "per your request, the aircraft is held pending review of conduct, payment status, and liability exposure." "Thank you," Evelyn said. "That will be all for now." "For now," Harper echoed. Captain Mason looked between them. "Ma'am," he said slowly, "with respect, who are you?" Evelyn met his eyes. "Someone who believes rules should apply consistently," she said. Behind her, the airline's future wobbled on a fulcrum no one had noticed, until it was too late. And Thomas Reynolds, standing in the middle of a terminal that no longer recognized him, finally understood that this was no longer about a seat. It was about everything he thought he controlled.
And what happens when control answers to someone else?
The temperature in the terminal seemed to rise, without the thermostat ever changing. Daniel Harper stood with his back straight, tablet held tight against his chest, eyes flicking between Evelyn and the aircraft beyond the glass. He was trying very hard not to look at Thomas Reynolds, the kind of effort that betrayed exactly how much he knew. Thomas felt it in his gut. That hollow drop, like missing a step in the dark. "This is a mistake," he said, forcing a laugh that didn't land. "You can't just freeze a transatlantic flight because of a customer complaint." Daniel finally turned to him. His expression wasn't angry. It was worse. It was neutral. "This is not a customer complaint," Daniel said. "This is a risk review." "What risk?" Thomas snapped. "She was removed. The situation is resolved." Evelyn shifted her weight slightly, the leather strap of her watch creaking softly. She didn't look at Thomas. She didn't need to.
Risk, Daniel continued, is when behavior creates exposure. Legal exposure, financial exposure, reputational exposure. Captain Mason felt a tightness form behind his eyes. He had flown enough years to recognize that tone. This was the voice people used when something irreversible had already been set in motion. "Daniel," Mason said, keeping his voice even, "if this aircraft is grounded, I need to inform my crew. We have passengers who will panic without information." Daniel nodded. "Of course, Captain. We'll coordinate messaging." Thomas scoffed. "Messaging," he repeated. "This is insane." Daniel's eyes cut back to him, sharp now. "What's insane," he said quietly, "is thinking this is still about you." That landed. A ripple of murmurs spread through the waiting area. Someone near the back said, "Did you hear that?" Another voice replied, "Something big is happening." Phones were raised openly now. No more pretending. A young man zoomed in on the aircraft, narrating under his breath.
A woman angled her screen toward Evelyn, curiosity outweighing discretion. Evelyn felt it, the shift from private scrutiny to public gravity. She had known it would come. It always did. Power, once hinted at, drew eyes whether you wanted it or not. Her phone vibrated again. She answered without looking at the screen. "Yes." "We've pulled historical data," the voice said. "There's a pattern." Evelyn closed her eyes briefly. "Say it." "Multiple incidents. Different cities. Same staff member. Same justification." Thomas felt his pulse in his ears. He couldn't hear the voice on the other end, but he could feel the sentence forming. The way eyes had started to linger on him. The way Captain Mason no longer stood beside him. Evelyn opened her eyes. "Document everything," she said. No commentary, just facts. She ended the call and finally turned to Thomas. "You asked earlier what I look like," she said. "I'll tell you what you never saw." Her voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be.
The gate area had gone quiet on its own.
"I look like someone who learned very early that systems protect the people they recognize," she continued. "So I learned the system instead." Thomas swallowed. "You're threatening me." "No," Evelyn said. "I'm explaining context." Daniel cleared his throat. "Ms. Brooks," he said carefully, "headquarters is requesting a direct line." "They can wait," she replied. "So can the board." Board. Captain Mason felt his spine straighten. "The board," he repeated. Daniel nodded once. Thomas took a step back. His heel bumped the edge of the counter. He caught himself, hands shaking now. "This is a setup," he said weakly. "You planned this." Evelyn's expression hardened, not with anger but with something colder. "No," she said. "I planned my life. You planned this moment." A child's voice cut through the silence. "Mom, why isn't the plane moving?" The mother hushed him too late. Heads turned. The human cost of the delay began to assert itself.
Captain Mason stepped forward.
"Ms. Brooks," he said, respectful, measured. "Whatever is happening here will ripple outward. People will miss funerals, weddings, medical appointments. I need to understand the scope." Evelyn met his gaze. Her voice softened slightly. "So do I, Captain," she said. "And that's why this can't be ignored." Daniel glanced at his tablet again, then spoke louder this time. "All Westbridge long-haul assets under the Atlantic lease are now flagged for review. Not grounded. Flagged. Flagged." Thomas felt the word hit him like a verdict. "How many?" Mason asked. Daniel hesitated. 6 aircraft. A collective gasp moved through the gate. 6, someone whispered. "That's the whole route." Thomas's knees went weak. He reached for the counter, gripping it hard. "This isn't possible," he said again, voice breaking. "One person can't do this." Evelyn stepped closer, not aggressively, intentionally. "One person didn't," she said. "An institution did. I just refuse to protect it from itself." A man in a grey suit approached from the side, phone pressed to his ear, face pale. He ended the call and looked at Daniel. "Legal wants to know if we're invoking the ethics clause." Daniel looked at Evelyn. She didn't hesitate. "Yes." The man's mouth fell open. "That clause hasn't been used in decades," Evelyn finished. "Which is why it still exists." Thomas stared at her now, really seeing her for the first time. Not her clothes, not her age, the certainty, the absence of doubt. "Who are you?" he asked hoarsely. Evelyn considered him for a long moment, not with triumph, with something like fatigue. "I'm the person your policies were written for," she said. "You just never expected me to look like this." A notification pinged loudly from Daniel's tablet. He glanced down, then up. "Media's picked it up," he said. "Someone's live streaming." Captain Mason closed his eyes briefly. He could already see the headlines forming.
The narratives hardening before the facts were even finished assembling.
Thomas's phone buzzed in his pocket. He ignored it. Then it buzzed again. And again. He fumbled it out, hands clumsy. Messages stacked on the screen. Operations. Scheduling. An unknown number. Another unknown. He answered the last one. "Yes," he said. A pause. Then his face drained of what little color remained. "I understand," he whispered. He ended the call slowly and looked up at Daniel. They want my badge. Daniel didn't answer. Evelyn did. They want accountability, she said. Badges come later. Thomas laughed, a broken sound. I was just doing my job. Evelyn's gaze didn't waver. No, she said. You were doing what felt safe. Around them, the terminal buzzed with restrained chaos. Announcements layered over each other. A supervisor hurried past, face tight. A camera crew appeared at the edge of the concourse, lights already switching on. Daniel stepped closer to Evelyn.
They're asking if you're willing to make a statement. Evelyn looked past him to the aircraft one more time, to the plane that had been nothing more than transportation an hour ago, now frozen by principle and paper. Not yet, she said. Let them sit with it. Captain Mason straightened his shoulders. Then I'll prepare my crew. As he turned away, Thomas called after him. Captain! Mason paused, but didn't look back. I never meant for this, Thomas said. Mason's reply was quiet, final. That's usually how it starts. Evelyn watched Thomas sink onto a chair near the window, hands covering his face, the world he trusted slipping out from under him. The airline was still grounded. The truth was still rising, and the reveal, when it came, would not be gentle. The boardroom in Westbridge headquarters was silent, in the way rooms get quiet only when something has already gone wrong. Screens glowed along the walls, feeds from airports blinking red where schedules had frozen.
Phones lay face down on the table, vibrating themselves numb. No one answered them anymore. Everyone already knew why they were ringing. Charles Whitman stood at the window, hands clasped behind his back, staring out over the city like height might give him distance from consequence. He was 68, silver-haired, measured, a man who had spent his life believing chaos could always be managed if it was addressed early enough. This was not early. Say it again, he said, without turning. The general counsel cleared his throat. The compliance hold was legally clean. It was triggered under the Ethics and Conduct Clause. We can challenge it, but not quickly. How quickly? Whitman snapped. Days, maybe weeks. Whitman turned. His face had lost its usual polish. We don't have days. No, the counsel agreed. We have hours. A younger executive leaned forward, knuckles white. Social media is calling it discrimination. The clip from the gate has crossed 1 million views. Whitman closed his eyes briefly. He saw the headline forming in his mind. He saw shareholders, regulators, politicians looking for something safe to condemn. Who is she? He asked quietly. No one answered right away. Then the chief operations officer spoke, voice low. Evelyn Brooks, founder and managing director of Brooks Aviation Holdings. Whitman opened his eyes. That's not possible, he said. They're a leasing partner, minor exposure. The COO shook his head. Not minor, layered, quiet. She sits behind 3 shell entities. We never connected the dots because she never wanted us to. Whitman felt the room tilt. She owns the paper, the COO continued. The debt, the clauses, the leverage. And we escorted her off a plane, Whitman murmured. Silence. Back at the airport, Evelyn Brooks stood alone near the windows, the world on the other side of the glass suspended in artificial stillness. The aircraft lights glowed but did not move. She watched ground crews circle it cautiously, like doctors around a patient no one wanted to touch yet. Her phone rang again. She answered it without looking. They're asking if you'll accept a call, the voice said. Chairman level. Not yet, Evelyn replied. They're offering an apology. Apologies don't move planes, she said. Contracts do. She ended the call and slipped the phone back into her pocket. Nearby, the younger flight attendant sat hunched in a chair, hands clasped so tightly her knuckles had gone pale. She watched Evelyn from a distance, fear and admiration tangled in her expression. Evelyn noticed and walked over. "You should go," Evelyn said gently. "You've done enough today." The young woman shook her head. "I want to stay. I've never seen this happen." Evelyn studied her. "Seen what?" "Someone not shrinking," she said. Evelyn's mouth curved into something close to a smile. "It took me a long time to learn how." Across the terminal, Thomas Reynolds sat alone, his uniform jacket folded on the seat beside him, like something he no longer recognized. His phone lay in his hand, screen lit with a message he had read 3 times and still did not understand. Administrative leave, effective immediately. He looked up as Daniel Harper approached. "They want you to come with me," Daniel said. Thomas laughed weakly. "Security." "No," Daniel replied. "Human resources." Thomas stood on unsteady legs. "This isn't fair." Daniel didn't answer. Fairness was no longer the currency being traded. They walked past Evelyn without stopping. Thomas couldn't bring himself to look at her. He stared straight ahead, jaw clenched, as if eye contact might finish what the day had started. Evelyn watched him go, not with satisfaction, but with a heaviness that settled deep in her chest. Consequences were never clean. They always carried collateral. Her phone buzzed again. This time she answered. "Ms.
Brooks," Charles Whitman said, his voice tight but controlled.
"This is Charles Whitman, chairman of Westbridge Air." "I know who you are," Evelyn replied. A pause. "Then you know this situation cannot continue." "It already has," she said. Whitman exhaled. "What do you want?" The question hung there, naked. Evelyn turned her gaze back to the aircraft, to the frozen schedules, to the invisible threads connecting decisions made years ago to the present moment. "I want acknowledgement," she said. "Not privately, institutionally." Whitman stiffened. "We fired the employee." "You removed a symptom," Evelyn said. "I'm talking about the disease." Another pause. "You want policy changes," Whitman said. "I want governance," she replied. "Training, oversight, accountability that doesn't depend on who someone thinks belongs where." Whitman's voice dropped. "And the aircraft." "That depends on your next move," Evelyn said. Silence stretched. Finally, Whitman spoke again. "If we comply."
"If you commit," Evelyn corrected, "in writing, publicly."
"And if we don't?" Whitman asked. Evelyn's voice did not change. "Then today is only the beginning." Whitman swallowed. He looked around the boardroom, at faces pale with calculation, at screens bleeding red. "I need time," he said. "You've had years," Evelyn replied. She ended the call. Around her, the terminal buzzed with controlled chaos. Announcements layered over each other. Passengers paced. Cameras hovered. Captain Mason emerged from a corridor and approached her, hat in his hands. "They've told us to stand down," he said. "Crews being released." Evelyn nodded. "Thank you for your professionalism today." Mason studied her for a moment. "You knew this would get ugly." "Yes." "And you did it anyway." "Yes." He smiled faintly. "Then I hope it was worth it." Evelyn watched as crew members dispersed, their routines disrupted, their certainty shaken. "It always is," she said softly. "Even when it hurts."
In the boardroom, miles away,
Charles Whitman stared at the contract projected on the wall. Words he had skimmed for years now glared back at him, heavy with consequence. Conduct clause, reputational harm, immediate suspension of rights. He realized, with a chill, that the company had been living on borrowed grace. And grace had finally run out. At the airport, Evelyn Brooks stood as the afternoon light shifted across the tarmac, the grounded aircraft casting a long shadow that stretched far beyond the runway. The airline had not moved, and neither had the truth. It was waiting for the moment when it would no longer be possible to look away. The press conference was scheduled for 12 noon, and by 11:30 the lobby of Westbridge headquarters looked less like an airline office and more like a courthouse before a verdict. Cameras lined the glass walls, cables snaked across marble floors. Reporters murmured into phones, rehearsing narratives before facts could slow them down. Security stood rigid, eyes alert, hands clasped. No one smiled. Evelyn Brooks arrived through a side entrance. She wore the same dark coat from the airport. No entourage, no statement jewelry, just the quiet confidence of someone who understood timing better than volume. Each step echoed softly, measured, as if she were walking into a room she had already studied from every angle. Daniel Harper met her at the elevator. He looked exhausted. "They're panicking upstairs," he said under his breath. "Legal wants to soften language. Marketing wants optics. The board wants to know how exposed they really are." Evelyn didn't slow. "They're exposed exactly to the extent they ignored this before." The elevator doors closed. The ascent was silent, except for the low hum of machinery. Daniel watched the numbers climb, then glanced at her. "They're still asking why you didn't take the settlement." Evelyn's reflection stared back at her from the brushed steel wall. "Because settlements teach nothing," she said. "They just reset the clock." The doors opened onto the executive floor. Inside the boardroom, Charles Whitman stood at the head of the table, jacket off, sleeves rolled up, the posture of a man trying to look useful in a fire he could no longer control. Around him, directors sat stiffly, eyes darting to Evelyn as she entered. No one spoke at first. "Ms. Brooks," Whitman said finally, "thank you for coming." "I didn't come," Evelyn replied calmly. "I arrived." Whitman nodded once, absorbing the correction. "The press is downstairs." "I know." "We're prepared to issue a statement," he said, acknowledging harm, outlining corrective measures. Evelyn placed her bag on the table and opened it. She removed a slim folder and slid it forward. "Here is the statement," she said. Whitman hesitated, then opened it. His eyes moved quickly at first, then slower. His face tightened. "This is extensive." "It's honest," Evelyn said. One of the board members cleared his throat. "You're asking us to admit systemic failure?" "Yes." "That could invite litigation," another said. "It already has," Evelyn replied. "You're just pretending it hasn't." Whitman looked up. "And if we refuse?" Evelyn met his gaze steadily. "Then the fleet remains grounded, and the market continues to speculate without guidance. That will be far more expensive than the truth." Silence pressed down on the room. Outside, a low rumble of voices rose from the lobby below. The press was getting restless. Whitman closed the folder. "You're asking us to change how this company sees itself." "I'm asking you to stop lying to yourselves," Evelyn said. "The rest will follow." A beat passed. Whitman straightened. "Very well." The decision landed heavily, like a door closing somewhere far away. Downstairs, flashes exploded as Whitman stepped to the podium. Cameras whirred to life.
The Westbridge logo loomed behind him, suddenly fragile. "My name is Charles Whitman," he began, voice steady but strained. "And today, Westbridge Air acknowledges that we failed." A murmur swept the room.
Evelyn watched from a monitor in a side conference room. Daniel stood beside her, arms crossed tightly. "He's doing it," Daniel whispered. "Yes," Evelyn said, "because he has no other move." Whitman continued, words carefully chosen but unmistakable. Discrimination, failure of oversight, immediate reforms, independent review, accountability. Then he stepped aside. "And now," he said, "I'd like to introduce someone whose experience forced us to confront these truths." The camera swung. Evelyn Brooks walked into frame. The room erupted in sound. Questions shouted, flashes fired, names mispronounced, corrected, shouted again. Evelyn stepped to the podium and waited. She waited until the noise collapsed under its own weight. "I didn't plan to speak today," she said. Her voice carried without strain. "I planned to fly." A ripple of uneasy laughter moved through the crowd, then died. "What happened to me was not unusual," she continued. "What was unusual was that, for once, the system was forced to look at itself in the mirror." She paused. "This is not about a seat, or a flight, or a single employee. It is about what we normalize when we decide who belongs without asking who they are." A reporter shouted, "Did you intentionally ground the airline?" Evelyn looked directly into the camera. "No," she said. "The airline grounded itself. I just stopped holding it upright." The clip would play on every network within the hour. Across the city, Thomas Reynolds watched it alone in his apartment. The uniform was gone now. The vest hung uselessly over a chair. His phone buzzed with a message he didn't open. Former colleagues, friends, people asking questions he could no longer answer. When Evelyn's face filled the screen, he felt something twist in his chest. Not anger, not hatred. Recognition. She wasn't gloating. She wasn't triumphant. She was explaining. And somehow, that hurt more. Back at headquarters, the press conference ended in controlled chaos. Daniel exhaled shakily. "It's done," he said. Evelyn nodded. "No," she replied. "It started." She turned away from the cameras and walked toward the elevator. Behind her, an airline began the slow, painful process of becoming something it should have been all along. And far below, on a runway that had not moved all day, a plane waited, not for permission, for change. The markets opened at 9:30, and Westbridge Air opened in freefall. Red arrows cascaded down trading screens like blood from a wound no one could stitch fast enough. Analysts spoke in clipped tones on cable news, careful words failing to soften what the numbers made brutally clear. Confidence had cracked. And once cracked, it didn't politely wait to be repaired. Evelyn Brooks watched it unfold from the quiet of her office, a glass-walled room overlooking the river. No television, no commentary, just a Bloomberg terminal humming softly, figures updating in real time. She stood with her arms crossed, eyes steady, breathing slow. Daniel Harper paced behind her. "Pension funds are exiting," he said. 2 already confirmed, another 3 considering. Evelyn didn't turn. "They hate uncertainty." "They hate being embarrassed," Daniel corrected. "Yes," she said. "That too." On another floor of the building, Charles Whitman sat at the long boardroom table, staring at the same numbers with very different eyes. His phone rang non-stop. Regulators, senators, donors, all asking versions of the same question. How did you let this happen? "We need to stabilize," the CFO said, voice tight. "Issue guidance, buyback, something." Whitman rubbed his temples. With what credibility? The general counsel shifted in his chair. "There is another concern." Whitman looked up. "Go on." "Ms. Brooks has been accumulating shares for years," the counsel said carefully.
quietly, through intermediaries. The room stilled. "How much?" Whitman asked. The counsel swallowed. "Before yesterday, just under 15%. And now?" A pause, a look exchanged. "Over 25, the counsel said. And climbing." Whitman leaned back slowly, the realization settling with the weight of inevitability. She didn't come here for an apology. "No," the COO said. "She came prepared." Back in her office, Evelyn's phone buzzed again. She answered. "Yes?" "The window is open," the voice said. "Volumes are heavy. If you want to move, it's now." Evelyn closed her eyes for a moment, not to hesitate, to remember. Her father's voice surfaced, uninvited, quiet, wry. "Don't confuse opportunity with impulse. One costs money, the other costs sleep." "Proceed," she said. Daniel stopped pacing. "You're doing it." "I'm finishing it," Evelyn replied. Across the city, Thomas Reynolds sat in a jobs center waiting room, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. He hadn't slept. His phone lay face down on the plastic chair beside him, the silence louder than any ringing. A television mounted in the corner played a muted news segment. The captions scrolled relentlessly. "Westbridge shares plunge as investors flee." Thomas watched without really seeing until a familiar face filled the screen. Evelyn Brooks. She stood at a podium again, this time not explaining, not defending, listening, letting others speak, executives, advocates, people he had never thought about until yesterday. He felt something inside him fold in on itself. A memory surfaced. A woman in a rumpled jacket years ago, standing awkwardly near the galley, him asking her to step aside. He couldn't remember her face, only the ease with which he had dismissed her. He looked down at his hands. They were trembling. At Westbridge headquarters, alarms rang on trading floors. Someone shouted that another institutional holder had dumped shares. Someone else shouted that the price was stabilizing. "Stabilizing," the CFO repeated, disbelief creeping into his voice. "Why is it stabilizing?" The counsel checked his screen, then looked up slowly. "Someone's buying," he said. Whitman's mouth went dry. "Who?" The counsel didn't answer immediately. He didn't need to. Daniel Harper stepped into Evelyn's office, tablet in hand, eyes wide. "You've crossed 30%. Evelyn nodded. "Good. The board is asking if you're mounting a takeover." Evelyn turned from the window for the first time that morning. Her expression was calm, focused. "They should have asked that yesterday," she said. In the boardroom, Whitman stood abruptly. "Call an emergency session," he ordered. "All directors, now." "They're already here," an assistant said from the doorway. "They didn't leave." The room filled quickly. Voices overlapping, fear sharpening into something close to panic. "We need to poison pill," someone said. "Too late," another replied. "Regulators will block her." "She's clean," the counsel said. "Cleaner than us." Whitman closed his eyes. Back in her office, Evelyn sat down at her desk for the first time. She opened a thin folder. Inside were handwritten notes, dates, names, incidents that had never made headlines. People who had called her quietly, years ago, after being humiliated, denied, dismissed. She ran her fingers over the paper. This was never about revenge. It was about record. Her phone rang again. "This is Charles Whitman," the voice said. "We need to talk." Evelyn didn't hesitate. "You should have listened sooner." "Evelyn," he said, dropping formality, "if this continues, the airline won't survive." She leaned back in her chair. "Then it shouldn't." Silence stretched. "You don't mean that,"
Whitman said finally. I do, Evelyn replied. But survival doesn't mean continuity. It means change. What do you want? He asked again, quieter now. Evelyn looked at the skyline beyond her window, at the city that had taught her patience the hard way. I want the board to step down, she said. Effective immediately. Whitman inhaled sharply. That's not how this works. It is now, Evelyn said. I hold controlling interest by end of day. Another silence. And if we refuse? Whitman asked. Evelyn's voice remained steady. Then I call a shareholder vote tomorrow morning. The market will decide who they trust. Whitman knew the answer before he spoke. He had seen the numbers. He had felt the ground shift. We'll convene, he said. Evelyn ended the call. Daniel let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. You're really doing this? Yes, Evelyn said, because pretending fixes nothing. At the job center, Thomas Reynolds stood when his number was called. He walked to the counter, handed over his resume. The clerk glanced at it, then at him. You worked for an airline, she said. Yes, Thomas replied. She hesitated. There's been a lot in the news. Thomas nodded. I know. She studied him for a moment longer, then slid the paper back. We'll be in touch. Thomas stepped away, the weight of uncertainty pressing down harder than any uniform ever had. In the boardroom, directors filed out one by one, faces drawn, careers ending not with applause, but with signatures. Charles Whitman remained alone, staring at the empty chairs. For the first time in decades, he felt what it was like to be on the wrong side of a system he had helped build. As evening settled over the city, Evelyn Brooks stood once more at her window. The trading day had closed. The numbers had settled. Westbridge Air was no longer drifting. It was changing hands. And for the first time since the morning at the gate, Evelyn allowed herself a quiet, private moment of stillness. Not triumph. Resolution. Because power, when finally revealed, was not loud. It was final. The vote was scheduled for 8 in the morning, and no one slept. Lights burned through the night on the 40th floor of Westbridge headquarters. Assistants moved like ghosts, carrying coffee no one drank. Lawyers whispered in corners, rewriting language that could no longer hide intent. The building itself seemed to hold its breath. Evelyn Brooks arrived just before dawn. This time, she did not come through a side entrance. The revolving doors parted for her, cameras flashing before she was even fully inside. Her coat was tailored now. Still dark, still restrained, but unmistakably deliberate. Her hair was pulled back, precise, not for spectacle, for clarity. Daniel Harper walked beside her, voice low. Shareholder attendance is above 90%. Proxy votes are in. They know how this ends. Evelyn nodded. They just need to witness it. They entered the boardroom. The long table gleamed under recessed lights. Screens along the wall displayed names, percentages, blocks of capital that represented retirement accounts, unions, endowments. Real lives, real trust. Charles Whitman sat at the head of the table, hands folded, eyes rimmed red. He had not slept. The man who had once controlled the room now felt like a guest waiting for permission to speak. Ms. Brooks, he said as she took her seat halfway down the table. Chairman, she replied. The corporate secretary cleared her throat. This special session is now in order. The formalities began. Motions read aloud, votes recorded, numbers tallied. No one spoke out of turn. When the final count appeared on the screen, it did not surprise anyone. 51.2%. A controlling interest. The room exhaled. The secretary's voice trembled slightly. By majority vote, the current board is dissolved, effective immediately. No applause,
No outrage, just the soft sound of chairs shifting as careers ended without ceremony. Whitman closed his eyes. When he opened them again, something in him had settled. "I assume you'll want the floor," he said. Evelyn stood. She did not raise her voice. She did not pace. She placed both hands on the table and looked around the room, meeting each gaze in turn. Some looked away. Others held on, searching her face for mercy or menace. "What happened yesterday did not begin yesterday," she said. "It began every time a concern was minimized, every time a complaint was buried, every time someone was told to accept humiliation as the cost of access." She paused. "I did not acquire this company to punish it," she continued. "I acquired it because it was broken. And broken systems don't heal themselves." One of the remaining executives shifted uncomfortably. "With respect," he said, "this scale of change will be disruptive." "Yes," Evelyn replied, "it will." Another spoke. "The brand," Evelyn interrupted gently, "is not the logo. It is the behavior you defend when no one is watching." Silence followed. "I am not here to manage day-to-day operations," she went on. "I am here to reset standards." She turned slightly, nodding to Daniel. He tapped his tablet, and a document appeared on the screen behind her. "Effective immediately," Evelyn said, "Westbridge Air will implement independent oversight on customer conduct incidents. Training will be mandatory, not optional. Leadership compensation will be tied to compliance, not just profit." A murmur moved through the room. "And finally," she said, "no employee will be empowered to remove a passenger based on appearance, assumption, or personal discomfort. Authority will answer to policy, always." She sat down. The secretary swallowed. "The motion carries." Just like that, the future shifted. Miles away, Thomas Reynolds stood at the counter of a small rental office, filling out a form with a pen that barely worked. The clerk glanced at his employment history, then at the news playing silently on a wall-mounted screen. Evelyn Brooks stood at a podium, name captioned beneath her. The clerk raised an eyebrow. "You worked there?" "Yes," Thomas said quietly. She hesitated. "Rough time." Thomas nodded. He signed the form and slid it back. Outside, the morning air was cold and sharp. He pulled his jacket tighter around himself, the absence of his uniform feeling heavier than he expected. For the first time in decades, no one deferred to him. No one stepped aside. It was terrifying. It was honest. Back in the boardroom, the meeting adjourned. People filed out slowly, unsure where to go next. Daniel lingered. "You did it," he said softly. Evelyn looked around the emptying room. "No," she replied. "I started it." He studied her. "Do you ever wish it had gone differently?" That morning. Evelyn considered the question. "Yes," she said. "I wish I hadn't needed leverage to be treated like a person." Daniel nodded. Outside the windows, the city came alive. Traffic surged. Planes lifted off in the distance, white arcs against a pale sky. Westbridge Air would fly again, under scrutiny, under pressure, under a different understanding of power. Evelyn gathered her things and walked toward the door. Behind her, the room that had once excluded voices now stood open, waiting to learn how to listen. And somewhere between the ground and the sky, the lesson was already traveling farther than any single flight ever could. 6 months later, the silence felt different. Not the nervous, waiting kind that had filled terminals and boardrooms, but a settled quiet. The kind that came after hard decisions had been made and survived. The kind that only existed when a system had stopped pretending. Evelyn Brooks stood in the hangar at sunrise, hands in the pockets of her coat, watching mechanics move with practiced ease around a wide-body aircraft gleaming under white lights. The logo on the tail was the same, But everything else had changed. Procedures, training, who got listened to, who got questioned. A new first officer climbed the mobile stairs, paused and nodded to her. Respectful, unforced. Daniel Harper joined her, coffee steaming in his hand. Customer satisfaction is up 14%. Complaints about crew conduct are down more than half. Turnover stabilized. Evelyn nodded. And internally? Still resistance, he admitted. Some people miss how things used to be. They miss being comfortable, she said. That passes. Across town, Thomas Reynolds sat at a plastic table in a narrow break room, fluorescent lights humming overhead. The clock on the wall ticked too loudly. He stared at it, willing the minute hand to move faster. His polo shirt bore the logo of a regional transport company, the fabric thin from too many washes. No stripes, no authority stitched into the sleeve, just a name tag clipped slightly crooked. Gavin. No. Thomas. He corrected himself silently. Just Thomas now. A younger co-worker dropped into the chair across from him, scrolling through his phone. "Hey," the kid said. "You used to fly, right?" Thomas hesitated. "I worked for an airline." The kid nodded, half listening. "Wild industry. My aunt still talks about that Westbridge mess. Says it changed everything." Thomas's throat tightened. Did it? The kid looked up, curiosity flickering. "You see the new policies? No tolerance stuff?" "Yes," Thomas said. "I've seen them." The kid shrugged. "Probably for the best." "Probably." At headquarters, Evelyn sat in her office reviewing a report. It wasn't glamorous work. Long paragraphs, dry language, accountability metrics. But she read every word. A knock at the door. "Come in," she said. Sarah Mitchell stepped inside, posture still a little tentative, despite the new title pinned to her jacket. Director of Ground Operations. Promoted quietly. Earned loudly. "We finalized the scholarship program," Sarah said. "For frontline staff, education assistants, leadership track." Evelyn smiled faintly. "Good." Sarah hesitated. "There's something else." Evelyn looked up. "Go on." "Thomas Reynolds filed a wrongful termination suit," Sarah said. "It was dismissed this morning." Evelyn absorbed that, not with satisfaction, with gravity. "On what grounds?" she asked. "Insufficient evidence. Pattern of behavior established. Multiple corroborating statements." Evelyn nodded. "Thank you for telling me." Sarah lingered at the door. "Do you ever think about him?" "Yes," Evelyn said honestly. "More than he thinks." Sarah left quietly. That afternoon, a small news segment aired between weather and sports. No dramatic music, no outrage, just facts. Under new leadership, Westbridge Air reports continued improvement. Analysts note the company's reforms may set a precedent across the industry. Evelyn watched it alone in her office, the sound turned low. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She let it ring once more, then answered. "Ms. Brooks," a male voice said, uncertain. "You don't know me. My name is Thomas Reynolds." Evelyn closed her eyes briefly. "I know who you are," she said. Silence stretched. She could hear his breathing, uneven. "I don't expect anything," Thomas said finally. "I just needed to say something." Evelyn waited. "I spent years believing I was protecting standards," he continued. "I told myself that, over and over. It took losing everything to realize what I was really protecting." Evelyn said nothing. "I hurt people," Thomas said. "Not just you. And I never saw it." A long pause. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," he said. "I just wanted you to know that I see it now." Evelyn leaned back in her chair.
The city glowed outside her window, busy, indifferent.
"That matters," she said quietly. "But seeing is only the beginning." "I know," Thomas replied, his voice cracked. "That's the hard part." "Yes," Evelyn said. "It is." He hesitated. "Thank you for answering." Evelyn ended the call gently. She sat for a long moment afterward, hands folded, thinking of all the apologies never spoken, all the calls never made. Change didn't erase harm, but it did leave a record. At the airport that evening, a flight prepared for departure. Same route, same time, different energy. Evelyn walked down the jet bridge without escort, dressed comfortably, anonymously. No one stared, no one whispered. She was just another passenger. At the door, a young purser smiled warmly. "Welcome aboard, Ms. Brooks." Evelyn paused. "How did you know?" The purser smiled back. "You checked in under your name, and our system tells us to greet people how they prefer." Evelyn nodded. "Thank you." She took her seat.
1A. Around her, passengers settled in. A grandmother adjusting her scarf, a man rubbing his eyes after a long day, a couple holding hands, nervous and excited. Normal. As the cabin door closed, the captain's voice came over the intercom. Calm, familiar. "Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the crew, thank you for flying with us. Our flight time tonight will be 6 hours and 30 minutes. Please relax and make yourselves comfortable." The plane pushed back smoothly. Evelyn looked out the window as the runway lights blurred into lines, then disappeared beneath them. The aircraft lifted, steady and sure, climbing into open sky. She closed her eyes, not because she was tired, but because for the first time in a long while, she didn't need to watch the system to know it was working. Somewhere below, a man counted minutes on a break room clock, learning what it meant to live without shortcuts. And somewhere above, an airline moved forward, carrying with it a lesson written not in headlines, but in policy, memory, and the quiet, stubborn dignity of people finally being seen. The plane lifted cleanly into the night, engines steady, the city folding itself into a grid of fading light beneath the wings. Evelyn Brooks sat back in seat 1A, hands resting on the armrests, feeling the familiar press of acceleration give way to calm ascent. The cabin was quiet, in the way long-haul flights always were at the beginning. A shared breath held by strangers moving together toward somewhere else. No eyes lingered on her. No tension hovered. She was not a symbol here. She was just a passenger. That, more than anything, felt like victory. Across the aisle, a man in his late 60s adjusted a blanket over his knees. 2 rows back, a woman whispered softly to her husband as they compared photos on a phone. Somewhere farther behind, a child laughed before being gently shushed. Ordinary sounds, ordinary people. The air no longer felt like it belonged to only a few. Evelyn closed her eyes for a moment, then opened them again. Not to sleep, but to remember. She remembered the weight of silence when she had been asked to stand. The way the cabin had leaned away from her without a word. The confidence on Thomas Reynolds' face when he believed the system would protect him simply because it always had. She remembered how small that moment had tried to make her feel, how familiar the shape of it was. She also remembered choosing not to shrink. The seatbelt sign chimed softly and switched off. A flight attendant passed by, offering water with a smile that reached her eyes. Professional, human, unforced. "Can I get you anything else?" the attendant asked. "No," Evelyn said. "This is perfect." As the attendant moved on, Evelyn glanced out the window again.
The darkness beyond reflected her face faintly in the glass. Older now. Lines earned honestly. She thought of all the times she'd been advised to soften herself, to dress differently, to sound less certain, to wait. She had waited long enough. In a quiet office far below, Daniel Harper watched the same flight number track across a screen, a small icon moving steadily east. He leaned back in his chair and exhaled, the tension of the past months finally loosening its grip. The company was stable now. Not healed, healing. There was a difference. His phone buzzed with a message from operations. Another smooth departure, another incident resolved correctly. Another day without excuses. Daniel smiled faintly and locked his screen. At a modest apartment across town, Thomas Reynolds sat at a small kitchen table, a cup of coffee cooling untouched beside him. The television murmured in the background, an evening news segment fading into commercials. He wasn't watching. He was staring at his hands again, steady now, older than they had felt 6 months ago. He thought about the call he had made, the words he had finally said out loud. He didn't know if redemption was something you earned, or something you practiced quietly until it became part of you. He only knew that he no longer confused authority with worth. Tomorrow he would wake up early. He would do his job carefully. He would listen more than he spoke. It was not a grand ending. It was a beginning. Back in the air, Evelyn adjusted her seat slightly, letting it recline. The lights dimmed to a soft glow. The plane hummed, a living thing doing what it was built to do, when guided by hands that respected it. She took out a thin notebook from her bag, the same one she had carried for years. Inside were notes, ideas, names. Not grievances, records. Reminders of why she had built what she had built in the first place. Power was never meant to be loud. It was meant to be precise. She wrote a single line on a fresh page, then closed the notebook and set it aside. Outside, the stars stretched endlessly, indifferent and constant. Inside, people slept, read, dreamed, trusted. The captain's voice came over the intercom, calm and unhurried. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are now cruising at altitude. Thank you for flying with us tonight. Thank you." Evelyn smiled to herself. This was what it was always supposed to be. Movement without humiliation. Access without permission. Dignity without negotiation. She rested her head back and finally let her eyes close, not out of exhaustion, but out of peace. Somewhere between departure and destination, something larger than a single airline had shifted. Quietly. Permanently. And if this story stayed with you, if it made you pause or think or feel seen, take a moment to like this video, subscribe for more stories like this, and comment these 3 words. Respect has power.